What is up, Facebook Live? I hope you're doing well. Hey, this is the second time I'm doing this, but I'm recording a lesson for the L3 Leadership Podcast, and I did this last month, and I just thought I'd go live with it, and so I'll be sharing the lesson live. Again, I'm recording a podcast, so I'm not going to do question and answer, or I'm not going to respond to anything that someone may type while I'm actually teaching, but after the lesson, I'll open it up to question and answer if anyone wants to join. So, that being said, I'll just jump right into this lesson, and I hope it encourages you. So for those of you on the podcast, this is part 2 of my 2-part series on the benefits and challenges of being a young leader. If you missed it last month, I shared on the benefits of being a young leader, and if you missed that and would like to listen to it, you can go to episode 113 of the L3 Leadership Podcast and listen to everything there. And again, today I'll be covering the 7 challenges of being a young leader. Just a few things to review from last lesson. I recommended a book that everyone read called Spiritual Leadership, and it's by J. Oswald Chambers. It's a phenomenal book. If you haven't read it and you're a young leader, you need to add it to your read list immediately. Spiritual Leadership is fantastic. So I recommend that just to kind of build a foundation for the lesson. And then purpose-wise, I wanted to do this lesson for 2 specific people. The first person I wanted to do this lesson for was young leaders. And again, if you're a young leader, I'm doing this lesson because 1, I want you to know that you're not alone. You know, last month I shared the benefits of being a young leader. Today I'm going to be sharing some challenges, and hopefully by the end of today's lesson you'll say, hey, I know exactly how, I'm just so grateful that I'm not alone. I'm going through those same things, I have those same frustrations, and hopefully I can equip you with some tools to help you overcome some of those challenges as well. If you're a young leader, I want you to know that you're in one of the most exciting seasons of your life. Seriously, one of the most exciting seasons of your life. Do not miss this, because here's what I know. One day, you're not going to be a young leader. I know it's hard to believe, but fast forward your life 10, 15, 20 years, and you're going to be the heroes that you looked up to, and there's going to be a generation below you with the same frustrations and benefits that you had when you were young. So you are not going to be a young leader forever, so enjoy this season. If you're a young leader, I also want you to know that if you'll handle this season of life correctly, if you'll be faithful with your season as a young leader, then you'll get exactly where God wants you to go and do exactly what God wants you to do 15, 20, 30 years from now. But you have to handle this season as a young leader correctly. If you're a seasoned leader, which is what I like to call them, or an older leader, however you want to say it, I'm doing these lessons because 1, I want you to realize and see the value of young leaders. I think too many times people miss out on the value. They just blow off the next generation because they think they're incompetent and all these different things and lazy. But I want you to realize there's a ton of potential in young leaders. I want you to recognize where young leaders are at. Again, last month I shared the benefits. Today I just want to share some challenges, and I hope that you'll see that these are things that young leaders get frustrated with and are getting challenged with on a daily basis. And so when you realize how they're getting challenged, you're really able to step into their life and make a difference. I want you to remember what it was like when you were a young leader. If you're a seasoned leader, you may have to think way back, but you were a young leader too. And I'm sure some of the challenges that I'm going to share, you had the exact same challenges. And so I just want you to remember that you were in these young leaders' shoes one time, and don't forget where you came from and how much grace and mercy people gave you and how much people invested in you as well. And then lastly, if you're a seasoned leader, I want you to invest in young leaders. That's the whole purpose of me wanting you to listen to this podcast, is I want you to grab a few young men, a few young women, and invest in their lives and pour into their lives and make a huge impact, because you have the ability to. So that was just real quick to review from last time. Now I want to jump right into the 7 challenges of being a young leader. My inspiration really for this lesson came, if you guys don't know, we do a monthly interview with leaders each month. And one of my favorite questions to ask leaders is, where do you see young leaders missing it most often? And I've done, I don't know how many interviews, 50 to 100 interviews, and I've seen such a consistent pattern in leaders' responses. And so I gathered up a bunch of leaders' responses from the interviews, and then I threw my own observations and experience into this, and that's how I came up with this lesson. So let's jump right into this. Lesson number 1, or challenge number 1, I should say. The number 1 challenge I see for young leaders is the challenge to be developed rather than discovered. Young leaders want to be discovered rather than developed, so the challenge is to be developed rather than discovered. And I see so many young leaders spending all their time and energy trying to get discovered. They want someone to see them. They want someone to put them in the spotlight. They want to be front and center, but they don't want to take the time or the discipline to actually develop themselves. But if you're a young leader, here's what I want you to know. If you'll focus on being developed, then one day you'll be discovered. I'll say that again. If you will focus on being developed, then one day you will get discovered. John Maxwell says this all the time. It's a little cliche, but he said development, and he talks about leadership, but development happens daily, not in a day. Your growth and development is going to happen daily, not in a day. You're not all of a sudden going to wake up and arrive as a young leader. It's going to take a time. It's going to take a journey. I remember when I was probably 24 years old, and I took one of my mentors out to lunch, and he was asking me what I wanted to do with my life, and I said, well, it would be really cool if I could be John Maxwell when I grew up. And really just doing something similar that John does, just adding value to people. And the mentor looked at me and said, well, and my nickname's Bubba. He said, well, Bubba, there's a long way between where you are now and where John Maxwell is, and it's going to be a long journey. And it's going to be a journey of development. And so I just have a vision that if I'll continually develop myself and handle this season as a young leader and just develop daily, I'll ultimately, quote unquote, be discovered or end up where God wants me to end up. I think about John Maxwell. I mentioned that I want to be with him. Things that I like to reflect on is John Maxwell started his leadership conference. There was 14 people at his first conference. We see him speaking to thousands and thousands and thousands of people every year, but he started off with 14 people in a room, and I'm sure he was pretty discouraged that there weren't enough people, but he had to start somewhere too. And so I just want to challenge you, take time to be developed. It's going to take you time to develop into the man or woman that God wants you to be. Dave Ramsey recently tweeted this. I love this. Dave Ramsey has a huge international platform, and he said, I've worked my butt off for 25 years, and now all of a sudden I'm an overnight success. Everyone sees Dave Ramsey. They see the talk shows. They see all these conferences. They see EntreLeadership. But they don't see what he was doing 25 years ago when he was starting his business over a coffee table and all the hours of discipline and investment that he put in himself to get to where he needs to be. One of my favorite development stories is I had a friend that does public speaking for a living, and he got to hear Zig Ziglar a long time ago in a Toastmasters meeting, and he actually got to spend time with Zig after Zig spoke, and he had a question for him. He said, Zig, how do I get to do what you do? I want to do what you do. I want to speak nationally to all these companies and all these things. And Zig just looked at him and he said, become an all-star where you're at. Become an all-star where you're at. He said, if you'll become an all-star in your company and your company will start to notice you, then I promise you other companies in the same industry will start to recognize you, and they'll start to ask you for advice. They'll start to have you speak at the conferences. And then when you become an all-star in your industry, that's when other people outside of your industry start to take notice, and that's when you really start getting influence in all these different realms. So just become an all-star where you're at. So if you're a young leader, don't focus on getting discovered, focus on getting developed. And you do that by just showing up every day, giving your best, and doing everything you can to grow and develop your potential. The second challenge that I see young leaders deal with is the challenge to be teachable. The challenge to be teachable. If I had to be honest, I would argue that this may be the number one challenge that young leaders face. I've seen so many people get sidetracked because they weren't teachable. They had leaders who loved them, and they had leaders that were willing to invest in them. They had peers that were willing to invest in them and speak truth to them that they needed to hear, but they weren't willing to hear it. And the reason they weren't able to hear it is because of pride. Matt Keller, who's the pastor of Next Level Church, he wrote a book on teachability. It's called The Key to Everything. But he said this about pride. He said, pride will keep us from teachability and will keep us from getting to where we want to go. Pride is a major hindrance to everything good in your life. And I just love that. And so many times pride just holds us back because we're not willing to hear the hard truths we may need to hear to grow to the next level. I wrote down a few of my favorite quotes when it comes to being teachable. Robert Frost said this. He said, education is the ability to listen to almost anything without losing your temper or self-confidence. And I just thought that was so good, because if we're going to humble ourselves and open ourselves up to mentors to pour into our lives, then we have to be able to listen to their feedback without losing our temper and without losing our self-confidence. And we need to push on through that and grow through the feedback. Ken Blanchard said this. He said, feedback is the breakfast of champions. And then John Wooden said this. He said, if I'm through learning, then I'm through. And all I want you to know is you need people in your life that can tell you no. And if I was sitting down with you right now and I said, hey, give me a list of people that speak into your life on a consistent basis and tell you things that you do not want to hear but need to hear, could you list those people? And if you can, I'm here to tell you, you need those people in your life. I did a blog post one time on the best feedback that I've ever received. And do you know that the things that have caused me to grow the most are often the things that I did not want to hear at all? Here's some of the feedback that I've received in my life that actually really stung, but it was told to me in love, and it's exactly what I needed to hear, and it helped me grow. When I was a young teenager, I was living a double standard lifetime. I was out partying all the time on weekends, and I was interning at my church during the week, and one of my friends caught me. He literally slapped me in the face and also caused physical pain. And he said, I know the lifestyle you're living, and I'm giving you 3 days to tell the pastor, and if you don't, I will. And he walked away. And that was exactly what I needed. I needed literally someone to slap me in the face at that point, and I needed that. And I cried for 3 days because I thought I was going to get kicked out of the church and all these things, that didn't happen. But that's what really caused me to turn my life around, was someone loved me enough to tell me the truth and tell me what I didn't want to hear. When I had that conversation with the pastor that weekend, I received another piece of feedback that changed my life. He said, my pastor said, Doug, I love you and I believe in you, but I can't let you lead and continue to live the way you're living, so you have a decision to make. He drew a line in the sand for me, and I didn't want a line in the sand. I wanted to live a double standard life, but he drew a line in the sand. He said, if you're going to be the leader that God's called you to be, you need to step up. I didn't want to hear it, but it's what I needed to hear. I needed to be teachable. My father-in-law, there was a time where I had health bills, I couldn't pay them, and I just let them go. I stuck my head in the sand, and they went to the creditors, and all kind of craziness happened, and man, I did not like it, and I had to pull my head out of the sand and actually deal with it. And I remember my father-in-law, when I went to him, and I was crying because I was so upset because I was irresponsible, and he just looked at me and said, this is part of growing up. And to be honest with you, my father-in-law has said that to me many, many times. This is part of growing up. But I needed to hear that. I needed to hear that I needed to grow up. Just a few other fun ones. My friend Zach Blair told me, Bubba, people don't wake up every morning thinking about you. That was fun to hear. But it's true. People don't wake up every morning thinking about me. My friend, actually, I was going back and forth with Laura before we were engaged. I wasn't sure if she was the one or not, and my friend called me out, and he just said, dude, you're selfish. You're selfish, and all you think about is yourself. Why don't you start serving Laura, and see what happens? And man, he called out the uncomfortable in me, but it caused me to change, and I started serving Laura, and we were engaged shortly thereafter. And all I'm trying to share with you is these are very uncomfortable conversations that I had with people that loved me, and they were willing to teach me to speak the truth and love to me. Now, what if I wasn't teachable? What if I just let my pride go up and say, they don't know what they're talking about, they're full of it, they don't know me, I'm not selfish, I can live a double standard lifestyle. I would not be where I am today, I promise you. I wouldn't be married to Laura if I wasn't teachable. So many things in my life I would not have if I weren't teachable. So I just want to encourage you, do everything you can to be teachable and get people in your life that can tell you no. Challenge number 3, the challenge to be faithful and patient. The challenge to be faithful and patient. Let me just break the news to you. It's going to take a long time to get to where you want to go. I'm sure if you're listening to this, you have a vision in your heart of something that you want to do or something that you want to achieve or something that you want to be in your life. And I'm here to tell you that from where you are now to where you actually will be when that actually all gets fulfilled, it's going to be a little bit of a journey. And it's going to require faithfulness, and it's going to require patience. But here's what I know, and this is a biblical principle. If you'll learn to be faithful in the small things and be faithful now, ultimately over time, you'll get more and more and more, and you'll be faithful over much. And I just want to encourage you 3 things if you deal with a lack of faithfulness or wanting to be faithful or a lack of patience is 1, develop a faithfulness attitude. I know I learned this lesson. I was interning in my church, and my only job was to wash pitchers in the janitor closet and set up and tear down for youth group. Literally, that was it. That was my only job every week. All the other interns had all these cool jobs. They got to teach. They got to do offering. They got to do graphic design. And here I am in a janitor's closet washing pitchers. And I was absolutely miserable. And I did that for a half a year, and I ended up quitting the internship. And I was like, this is the dumbest thing ever. And I was going to walk away, which if I would have walked away, it probably would have ruined my life. But ended up quitting the internship. The pastor said, Bubba, have you actually prayed about this? And I said, no, I haven't. He said, pray about it and see what happens. So I prayed, and God really dealt with my heart. I'll just share it. It's a little preachy, but there's a verse in Isaiah where this man says, listen, everything I put my hand to is absolutely worthless and useless. I feel like I'm doing everything for nothing. And all of a sudden I like lit up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm in the Bible. And the next verse said this, and this is what changed my life. It said, yet I leave my reward in the Lord's hand. Yet I leave my reward in the Lord's hand. And that's when it hit me that I was looking to all these people to give me my next step. I was looking to people to give me the jobs that I wanted. I was looking to people to promote me. But the reality was I just wasn't being faithful. And I had to learn to leave the reward, leave the promotion, leave all those things that I wanted in God's hand. And I said, God, if you want me to wash pitchers for the rest of my life, if you really want me to do that, I'll be faithful washing pitchers for the rest of my life. And I washed pitchers for another 3 or 4 months, and all of a sudden someone gave me an opportunity to speak. It was the first time I ever spoke. I never spoke before in my life, didn't know I had a gift to speak. But I would not be speaking to you at this podcast if I didn't learn to be faithful washing pitchers. And so maybe, I don't know what washing pitchers is to you. Maybe you feel like you're in a season of washing pitchers, but keep washing pitchers and trust God for your reward. I promise you, if you'll be faithful washing pitchers in your world, God will take you to the places that you want to go, but he won't take you there if you're not selfish. The second thing I want you to know, if you're dealing with impatience and not being faithful, is you're probably already doing a little bit of what you'll ultimately be doing, just not at the level you'll be doing it. Ed Glover told me that once. He said, what you're ultimately called to do, you're probably already doing. And all he was saying was, listen, whatever God's called you to, he's put the gifts and talents that you need in you already. You already have the equipment. You just need to be faithful and grow and develop those things. And so start to really evaluate yourself and say, hey, what gifts am I already using that I'm ultimately going to be using 20 years from now? I hope that encourages you. And then lastly, and this is just to challenge you, this really challenges me, but what if you never get to where you want to go in your heart? Or what if you never achieve what's in your heart? Would God be enough? Would God be enough? With L3 leadership, I'm thinking, if L3 leadership ultimately becomes nothing and never makes an impact in my life, ultimately, is God enough? If I never fulfill the dreams that I have in my heart, is God enough? And I think unless we get to a place where God is enough, I think we are disadvantaged to actually getting to where we want to go. We ultimately just have to say, God, I trust you for my reward. I'm just going to be faithful day in and day out and trust you for the rest. And when you do that, I promise you, God will take care of his part. So learn to be faithful and learn to be patient and let God live on God's clock and let him take care of your journey. The fourth challenge that I see young leaders have, and this one's tough, but it's the challenge to recognize that it's not about you. The challenge to recognize that it's not about you. Rick Warren tweeted this a few months back. He said, the most important advice on leadership that I can give young leaders is it's not about you. Ouch. It's not about you. Reminds me of that feedback that I got that people don't wake up every morning thinking about me. But life, it isn't about you. And the gifts that God put in you and the passions that God put in you and whatever influence God's given you, it's not for you. It's for other people. My pastor said this recently. He said, success in leadership isn't when you reach your full potential. It's when you get to a place where you're helping other people reach their potential. Again, everything that God's put in you, it's not for you. It's not so that you could have this big house and so you could get this promotion and have all this fame. It's so you can serve other people. And here's 2 tests that I use to humble me and to remind myself that it's not about me. And I called it the selfishness test. And I'm pretty selfish. If you want to find out how selfish you are, have a baby. This wasn't in my lesson, but I'm pretty selfish. My baby girl, Olivia, she's sleeping in the room next to me. She's about 5 months old. I realized how selfish I am when I had a baby because the baby wants everything. She doesn't care if I have a morning routine or if I want to work out. It's not about me anymore. It's all about her. It's really causing me to die to myself. But let me just share the selfishness test. I want to share 2 scriptures with you. But part 1 of the selfishness test, how do you treat people that can do nothing in return for you? How do you treat people that can do nothing in return for you? This is in Luke chapter 14, verse 12 through 14. But Jesus said this. He said, when you give a lunch or dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, your relatives or rich neighbors. If you do, then they may invite you back, and so you will be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. Again, how do you treat people that can do nothing for you? I love that invite people that can't pay you back. And if I'm honest with myself, all too often I'm focused in on my relationships, on what's in it for me. And God's really teaching me through the selfishness test to die to myself, which leads to the second question. What do you do that other people don't know about and will never know about? What do you do for other people that no one knows about and no one will ever know about? Jesus said, when you give to the poor, do not sound a trumpet before you as hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, so they may be honored by men. Truly I say to you, they have their reward in full. But when you give to the poor, do not let your left hand know what the right hand is doing, so that your giving will be in secret. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. I don't know about you, but especially in a social media world, it feels good when everyone can like what you do, right? You show a picture of yourself serving somewhere, and it's like, wow, look what I did, and everyone can like it. And man, that verse basically says if that's why you're doing it and that's why you're posting it, then that's your reward. Your reward is a bunch of people clicking a like button on Facebook. Woohoo! But man, we all yearn for that sometimes. And this is how I'm dealing with life, not about me, is just asking myself my question, how am I treating people who can do nothing for me in return? And what am I doing that no one else will ever know about? How am I serving people that no one knows about? It's not going to be on Facebook. I'm not going to, do a blog post on it. I'm just serving people to serve them. The fourth challenge was the challenge to recognize it's not about you. 3 more before we wrap up. Challenge number 5. The challenge to have an abundance mentality. The challenge to have an abundance mentality, and this really has to do with the hard issue of jealousy. I think when the younger we are, the more apt we are to be jealous and envious when other people are doing well, especially our peers. When other peers start seeming like they have the house, they have the success, they have the influence, and we start getting jealous, or someone else starts a church and we're like, oh my gosh, I can never start a church because they started a church. And I just want you to have an abundance mentality. I think all too often, if you're thinking thoughts like that, if you're jealous of people, if you're envious of people, you don't have an abundance mentality. You should be thrilled when other people succeed. I always think about, when people, even for healthy leadership, in the podcast, I have people tell me all the time, well, why do you do the Healthy Leadership podcast? There's like billions of podcasts out there that people can listen to. I've seen people plant churches and they're like, why would you plant a church? There's billions of churches out there. Like, why do we need another church? Or why would you start a financial company? There's millions of others. The reality is, all those churches aren't reaching everybody that needs to be reached. As many churches as there are, there's still millions of people that have never been reached. As many podcasts as there are, there's still people that have never listened to all those podcasts, right? And so for me, I always think about who are the people that God's uniquely asking me to reach. I may not reach as many people as Stephen Furtick will reach or John Maxwell, but that just might not be my call. But does that mean that I won't make a big impact in people's lives? My goal is, if I'll just be faithful, I'm going to make the impact that God intended me to make. And I'm not going to focus on what God's doing in this person or in that person or in this business or in this nonprofit or in this church. I'm just going to focus on my journey, because I have an abundance mentality. I believe that everyone can be successful. I believe that everyone can make an impact, and I believe that that's how you'll really keep your heart in a good place. And so just challenge yourself. If you find yourself getting bitter or envious when other people succeed, just realize that you're probably dealing with a lack of an abundance mentality, and just realize that God can just do unbelievable things through you as well. I think about when I don't even remember what disciple it was, but someone said to Jesus, hey, what about that disciple? What are you going to do with him? And Jesus said, what I do with him is none of your business. Just focus on what I called you to do. And I think that's something that we could all take home with us too. Just focus on what God called you to do, be faithful, and be thrilled when other people succeed. Challenge number 6 for young leaders, the challenge to define success correctly. The challenge to define success correctly. I think the younger you are, the more you view success as how much money you'll make, where you'll live, what you own, what you can have, how much influence you have, how many people you reach, all these different things. But that's not a great definition of success. And here's what I know. When you don't have the correct view of success, you are setting yourself up for massive disappointment, massive discouragement, and ultimately massive depression, to be honest with you. Again, if you have an incorrect view of success, if you think I'm only successful if I achieve this or if I have this, well, what if you never get that? Then you're going to live your life disappointed. And so what I want to challenge you to do is define success for you. One of my favorite things to do when I interview leaders is I always ask, hey, what do you want your legacy to be? At your funeral, if you had to have your kids speak and you got to hear your kids speak, what would you want your kids to say? And do you know, no one has ever told me, oh, I wish they would say how awesome of a house I owned, or I wish how many places I traveled, or what I did. At the end of the day, most leaders just say, I would want them to say that I love God and I love people and that I made the world a better place. At the end of the day, that's all people want to be remembered for. So that's how they should base their success on, right? Are they loving God and loving people? That's been the number one answer that I hear. And so here's just a thought. If you're loving God and loving people, you're way more successful than you ever thought possible. You're way more successful. And if you don't think so, you're probably viewing success incorrectly. Here's a few definitions of success that I really like, that I think are fair. Where did these go? There we go. John Wooden said this. He said, success is a peace of mind, which is a direct result of self-satisfaction and knowing that you did your best and became the best you were capable of becoming. It's just knowing that you did your best and became the best that you were capable of becoming. If you're doing your best and doing that you're successful. You're more successful than 90% of the people on the planet because you're doing your best and becoming your best. John Maxwell said this. He said, success means having those closest to me love and respect me the most. And I've absolutely adopted that definition of success for me. He actually defined, he was in his late 30s and he noticed that a lot of his peers started getting divorces and having affairs and all these things, really as a result of midlife crisis. And they were more focused on work than family. And he determined that from that point on, success wouldn't be defined in what he did, but it would be defined in having those closest to him love and respect him the most. And so I just love that definition. And then lastly, John Maxwell said, success in life is knowing my purpose in life, growing to my maximum potential, and sowing seeds to benefit others. And it really doesn't get any better than that. And so I want to encourage you, those are a few definitions of success, but make your own list of success. I sat down and I wrote down a list of things of what I think success is. For me personally, success is doing what God called me to do. It's loving God and loving people. It's being a great husband to Laura. It's creating memories with people that'll last a lifetime that I love the most. It's raising world-changing kids, and I have one in the room behind me sleeping, and I get to do that on a daily basis. It's doing the best I can to become the best I can be. It's making a difference in the lives of others. It's growing to my maximum potential. Success is who I am in Christ, and success is knowing my purpose in life. That's how I define success. And so I just want to encourage you, maybe you take a journal tonight and write down, hey, this is my definition of success, and I hope that it will add value to your life. And then the last challenge as we start to wrap up. The last challenge, and this is kind of fun, but the last challenge is to manage these challenges. If you're a young leader, this is the best quote I've ever heard. Andy Stanley said this. He said, when you have a challenge come up in your life, you have to determine if it's a problem to solve or a tension to manage. And some things are problems that you can solve, but other things are just tensions that you have to manage. And I think the challenges that I just went through, they're not problems that you can solve and all of a sudden one day you'll just wake up and not deal with those challenges anymore. But I think they're tensions that you can manage on a daily basis and manage your heart. And so what I want to encourage you to do as we wrap up is take a look at these 7 challenges and really take some time and journal on them. Journal and reflect, hey, where am I on this? What did really challenge me? Where do I need to change? And maybe you can come up with an action step or two based on what I shared with you today that can add value to your life. Excuse me. So I'll end with these questions. Which of these challenges do you struggle with? And I'm curious, what other struggles and challenges do you see? Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. What other challenges do you see young leaders have? So that's my lesson. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you're on Facebook Live, I'll take a minute if anyone has questions. If anyone has a question, I will answer them. If not, I'll just close up with a few announcements, and then we'll end this. And then the podcast will be up tomorrow. So if anyone's on, does anyone have anything they want to say and or ask? Greg Fuhrer, what's up? Hey, Lori Weimer, Mary Beth Seiling. What are 2 books that I recommend for young leaders? If you missed the beginning, Spiritual Leadership by J. Oswald Chambers is one that I always recommend. I guess it depends on what you mean by young leaders. If you're looking at more of the teenage age years or the college years, a book that really impacted my life was Today Matters by John Maxwell. Just on the power of today and handling today correctly. That's one that I find myself recommending a lot as well. So those are 2 I'd recommend. Anyone else? Thoughts, questions? Kevin Seiling, what's up? I love spending time with you at the wedding Saturday, man. Love you. For 30s, what do I recommend for 30s? Just off the top of my head, we're going through a book right now in my mastermind group called Necessary Endings by Henry Cloud. It's a really challenging book because it basically says there's going to be necessary endings in your life. Sometimes it may be that you're getting fired. It may be you have to quit a job because it's uncomfortable. But I think if young leaders can really grasp necessary endings, it's going to help them and save them from a lot of emotional hurt in their life. I wish I would have read that when I was earlier. So necessary endings, and then just a great staple for a leadership book is Courageous Leadership by Bill Hybels. It's a fantastic leadership book for someone in their 30s and really any age. If you're in your 90s, I don't know, Hamlin, you're awesome. What would you say or do to build a better person? Are you talking about building and investing in leaders? What would you say makes a young leader? What would you do to say or build? Tommy, are you asking how do you become a better person, or how do you help someone else become a better person? Tommy? I hope it's Tommy. Yes. So how do you become a better... Yes, I don't know what the yes is, but how do you become a better person? I think develop a plan for personal growth. Start reading books, start listening to podcasts. Oh, how do you help someone else? There we go. Thank you. Spend time with them, and really, you just need to spend time with them, to be honest with you. And you can be really, really intentional. You can do things like start a small group where you actually go through curriculum together and you go through life together, and there's lots of ways that you can help people grow through that. Or if there's mentors that or mentees that you're looking to invest in, just spending time with them, giving them resources, telling them, hey, I listened to this podcast. I think you would love this podcast. I think it would add value to your life. Or, hey, actually buy them a book and say, hey, I want to go through this book with you. Have them over your house and let them see how you live. I think one of the greatest ways we learn from others is by example. I know for me, I learned how to be a better person by being around good people, which is something I wasn't around when I was a teenager. So when I actually got exposed to godly leaders, it really helped change my life because I caught more of who they were than really most of what they taught me. They taught me all kind of great things, but who they were taught me more than anything. And then, they talk about inner city kids that have really, really hard circumstances. They say the number one factor of kids that actually make it out of hard circumstances in the inner city and do great things to their lives is they had someone else show them another way. And I just love that. And I think that's why every young leader needs a mentor. We all need people in our lives that can show us another way to become a better person. So I hope that helps you. Does anyone else have any questions or anything they want to talk about? All right, well, if you have any more questions, just type them. I'll just end with a few announcements. Again, if you didn't get to listen to the whole podcast, the podcast will be up tomorrow on the L3 Leadership Podcast. We would really appreciate it if you would jump on iTunes and go to, just look up L3 Leadership, and if you would subscribe and leave a rating and review, that really does make a difference for us. If you are in the Pittsburgh area and you want to be a part of L3 Leadership and you want to be in a mastermind group, every Tuesday night we do mastermind group webinars from 9 to 9:30 p.m. Online through video. So if you'd like to join one of those, let me know. Just comment below and I'll send you information on how to join the webinar. And then finally, this Saturday, we have an L3 Leadership Breakfast in Pittsburgh with Denny Patton. He is the founder of Silver Ring Thing. He's phenomenal. And he's going to be talking about how to be an entrepreneur and how he started Silver Ring Thing and turned it into this massive ministry that it is today. And it's going to be a phenomenal breakfast. So I hope you can make it out to that. And if there's nothing else, we'll just end there. I'll like to join. Tom, if you want to join, just message me your email address and I will email you. That would be the best way to get in contact with me. So thanks everyone for listening to me. I hope these challenges helped you and I hope you have a wonderful evening. See ya.